A glorious good evening to you. Right off the bat, I want to thank everyone, each and every one of you who has subscribed to the Power and Praise channel. I have no idea that this channel was going to have more than 10 subscribers, much less at the last count, 110. Praise God on that. I want to keep my sermons, speech, presentation, however you feel like this is resonating with you. I want to keep this topical and obviously from a spiritual standpoint. But tonight's presentation has a little tint of politics in it. And I won't delve too far into politics because I promised myself that I would stay out of this and I would just let God work his will between now and November. I'm just praying that our fabric as a country stays intact while we go through this process. Tonight, I want to talk about love thy neighbor as yourself. For those of you who read the Bible, it is mentioned not only with the book of Matthew, but the book of Mark as well. And I like to start off by reading from the book of Mark, chapter 12, verses 28 through 31. It says, one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticed that Jesus had given them a good answer. He asked him, of all the commandments, which one is most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. He says, and the second is this: love your neighbors as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. I interpret it as not only loving your next door neighbor, but loving your fellow human being as you would love yourself. To put this in layman's terms, as a friend, I want to love and respect my friends, and I hope that they in turn reciprocate that. That's the way I want to be treated, so that's the way I'm always going to treat those who I come in contact with. I don't care if you're a colleague, you're a friend, you are a family member, or you're just a stranger who I'm meeting for the first time. I always want to reciprocate. I always want to show love. I always want to show respect. And I'm hoping that that comes back to me. That's the best way I can describe it. There may be some theological scholars that have maybe a more educational definition of that, but just to put it in layman's terms, it's not just your next door neighbor. It's how you love your fellow humans. And frankly, right now in our country, we're a long way from any sort of civil discourse. If you're politically driven, if you're racially driven, if you're religious, you're religious driven, and an individual or a group doesn't agree with you, now you're hating that person just because they don't agree with you. Growing up in Western Pennsylvania, there was nobody that was the same political affiliation. You could live next door, a Democrat could live next door to a Republican or an independent. There was no animosity as to what your political background was or what your religious philosophical views were. And now it seems like if you don't agree with someone, there's automatic hatred. I think that's permeating everywhere. And there's no better view or scope to look at that than social media. I'm on social media, and the stuff I see makes me raise my eyebrow. So I would really get a little upset when I see political content. So now I just took the best road for me is not just to acknowledge it, just to watch it and then move on. If I don't agree with someone, I'm just going to move on. I'm not going to sit and try to debate you. No one has time for that. There are far too many important things going on than to sit and debate somebody over your political views or your religious views or your racial views. And we are a hotbed right now. This country, we are at a point that I don't even recognize this country. And I've 11 years in the military and traveling all around the world representing the United States. It's just very, very disconcerting. And I hope we find a way as a society to get back to our beliefs and loving one another, loving thy neighbor as thyself. I want to go back to maybe 2002. I was assigned to Vice President Al Gore, and I had to travel out to Las Vegas because this was right after Vice President Gore lost the election to George Bush. So he was still very high profile. Vice presidents, after they're finished with their terms, don't receive Secret Service coverage. And a lot of people think they do, but that's a misnomer. The vice president was scheduled to go out to Vegas and speak at a large convention. And he was going to do a mock debate with Senator Bob Dole of Kansas. I didn't know the relationship between those two until I got in the green room. And I got the vice president in and got him, he was getting mic'd up, and then Senator Dole comes in. And these two had a mutual affection for each other. It was obvious as soon as they got into the room. It was almost like I'm jabbing with a family member or a good friend who we go back and forth and have fun with each other. It was a thing to watch. You know, they were asking about family, they were hugging each other. I thought it was just brilliant to see a former Democratic vice president, a senator of Tennessee, and this staunch Republican senator of Kansas, the two of them getting along in that room, I thought was priceless. I don't know if that still goes on or not in politics, but it doesn't seem to appear on the surface that Democrats and Republicans can get together after all this and have a drink, have a glass of wine, have a beer, have a dinner together. When I worked in protection and when I would go out at night, even with my colleagues, you would see politicians in some of these upscale restaurants around Capitol Hill having dinner and dining together in private rooms. You could still see them. They got along good. I don't know what's going on now, but it's troubling that there is so much hatred and there's such a wall of distrust amongst our nation. I'm hoping and praying that we get to a point where we go back to having civil discourse. If you don't agree with me, it's okay. There is zero problem with you not agreeing with me. But if you're mad at me and you hold me in contempt just because you don't agree with what I'm saying, that's problematic. I'm just gonna say it, that is problematic. And I just never remember our country being that way. And I traveled a lot, and I've been in many different socio-economical circles. I mean, I've been to the top circles and been down at the bottom and seen people at least get along, even if they didn't agree. I have just one more story. I was working for a prestigious foundation, and we were traveling to South Africa. During our travels on Sundays, they would split the groups up to whoever, if you wanted to go worship on a Sunday, whether you were a Presbyterian, Methodist, Lutheran, Catholic, no matter what, the group would arrange, the locals in country would arrange to take some of the group to worship services. One of the trustees knew that my wife was a Presbyterian and her father was a Presbyterian minister. So she came up to me and said, "Hey, Si, we're gonna go to a Presbyterian church in Johannesburg. You coming along?" I was like, "Of course." So we get to this big church, beautiful structure in downtown Johannesburg. And this was in March of 2003. So this is right when the war kicked off with Iraq. We had sat down almost third or fourth row from the pulpit. And this minister, when he got his sermon going, he was fire and brimstone, baby. He was on a roll. He knew there were American executives in church. So he took that as his forum to say, "I am going for broke." And he ripped into President George W. Bush. And I was at one side of the pew and I looked down at the executive sitting down there. She's a staunch Presbyterian from Nebraska. But I looked at her and she was beak red. And I could see her jaw muscles just flinching, like, I just want to go up there and just wail on this guy. I'm like, oh boy. And after the service, she came up to me and she was very upset. She said, "Si, I really want to go talk to him." And I said, "Well, let's go." She was like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." So we're leaving out of the church. We're going through the receiving line. And I told the pastor, "Hey, one of my colleagues wants to have a discussion with you." I said, "Okay." He said, "Sure." I let those two talk and I stepped away and I just watched, and she got whatever it was off her chest, trust me. And he was nodding his head, he was smiling. So it was obviously an amicable discussion about theological, religion, politics. It was about a 10-minute discussion, and then she came back over to me and she was like, thank you. I said, for what? She was like, I really wanted to get that off my chest. I was like, well, good for you. I never asked her what they discussed, but she felt good about it. I looked at the minister and I shook his hand and I was like, very interesting sermon. I can only say interesting because I understood where he was coming from. But it was, and I knew he had an audience of Americans in there, so I knew he probably upped his game a little bit. I give that story just to say, sometimes all you have to do is talk about your disagreements, or if you're not feeling what somebody says, there's a thing, it's called civil discourse. You know, the definition is having a conversation to have a better understanding of one's opinion. It's not that hard, folks. She had it and she was good and she thanked me profusely. I was like, you don't have to thank me. You know, I just wanted to make sure you had to say what you had to say to the minister. But it was a good story. She got it off her chest. And we, you know, as we traveled throughout the world, her and I were buddied up going to Presbyterian churches, not only in Africa, but in Brazil and then down in Central America as well. Again, I give you that example just to say, if you don't agree, why not just talk? Why be mad? Why befriend somebody, or why cast somebody out to a Facebook land of misfit toys or whatever? Our society should not be to a point now where we have so much hatred and animosity. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for us as individuals. It's not healthy for us as a nation. It's not healthy for us as a people. I mean, our friends from around the world are sitting back and watching us, and they're like, wow, this is that shining beacon on the hill known as the United States of America. We are not united right now, friends. We are very, very divided. And I am praying to God that he shines his mercies and blessings down on each and every one of us to remind us that we love our neighbor as we love thyself. Amen. Peace, love to every one of you. I hope God blesses you. I hope he shines his mercies down on each and every one of you. Have a glorious night. Have a glorious week ahead. And God bless each and every one of you. Good night.